It's really funny watching the entire right wing propaganda sphere go from hating Teslas and saying how they're not real trucks and EVs are terrible to the endless propaganda across my feed uh, that's basically just giving fealty to Elon Musk and his Teslas. And it's amazing how rapidly that changed with power and with tribalism and people feeling like they got the new quarterback on their team. And this is how propaganda works. It's a game to the ultra wealthy. See how they can manipulate the entire world into changing their perspectives. And it's very effective. In this era, it's pretty dystopian, honestly. But it's been dystopian in every era of new communication. A lot of what I do is pattern recognition. Watch how social media and communication changes things and changes people's minds almost overnight these days. There's a reason they told you to distrust the media, and it's so they could catch people in their web of lies. It's almost exclusively lies in any new media. Propaganda is always the first thing that gets used in new media. You'll often have a period of time where it's not that, and small communities that celebrate the goodness of new media. But it doesn't take long for that to get exploited by bad actors. And it's been happening since the beginning of everything, since the beginning of all communication forms. In every era of new media, same thing happens. Hitler exploited the new media of television in his time, but it goes back even further than that. From the printing press onward, it's resulted in the same type of thing. Even the written word, but we have less record. Obviously there wasn't as much stuff written down during that time. People are left unsuspecting because they continue to try to use common sense on something that is entirely uncommon. And that's how it works every single time. And this is what I studied, spent most of my life studying. World War II and its propaganda and the use of new media, probably my top topic of study. So how would propaganda work in my era, and how quickly? In 2011, millions of people went from hardly using the internet to it mostly just being something that was in the corner of your house. With some exceptions, there were people that used it daily, found ways to bring the internet with them to places, but it was exceedingly uncommon. In 2011, that was the year I also happened to work for Verizon Wireless, so I watched this all happen. Everyone went from the internet kind of being over there and not really a part of your life to it being in your pocket every day. And it took 5 years for that to become mass amounts of propaganda and lies utilizing new media. Even going so far as to tell you, distrust all of the old media that you've ever known. So let's go back and talk a little bit about the origins. Let's go back to the printing press. That was invented in 1450. And it took 3 years for wars to begin emerging all over Europe. The Ottoman conquest of Constantinople in 1453, the War of the Roses in 1455, which is the English Civil War, the Italian War in 1455 as well, the 13 Years' War between Poland and Lithuania, 1454. Then came the telegraph, and that was invented in the United States in the 1830s. But that one didn't saturate into the general public. But it still led to some actions. There was the Crimean War, the American Civil War, the French-Prussian War, the Austrian-Prussian War. All major wars in the regions. And the communication revolutions typically left things being regional. Left wars being regional. But as communication increases and distance increases, the wars become more and more macro. So after the telegraph and all the crazy wars, then we got the telephone in the 1870s, which allowed people to begin coordinating. Well, hopefully I don't have to tell you too much about what happened in the United States after the 1870s. The Trail of Tears, the end of Reconstruction, the legalization of segregation, mass lynchings increased. Well, how do you think that happened? The KKK increased communication to coordinate between bad actors. Then came radio in the 1890s, along with photography being a lot more accessible to the general public. Which, that one namely, and I'm a photographer. That one led to people saw ghosts and aliens and all kinds of stuff that they didn't see. And this is what happens when you try to apply common sense to new media, because it's not common. How do you use common sense on things that are completely uncommon? You can't. It's not a one-for-one application, especially when the messaging that first emerges in new media is typically dishonest actors utilizing it to access or gain power. So radio in the 1890s, and along with photography, now suddenly people were seeing things that maybe weren't there, or they couldn't understand because we'd never really looked at moments frozen in time before. We'd never really heard human voices over a broadcast. And human voices can be convincing. Radio started expanding communication beyond borders, and the U.S. got involved in the Spanish War against the Philippines. And that ultimately led to those regional wars becoming larger. The Balkan Wars, which were the precursor to World War I, then World War I. Then things stabilize. But it's only after massive bloodshed, typically. And then a new media comes to be. Typically took a long time. It was 300 years between the printing press and the telegraph. And so television came in the 1920s, and that's another new media. And once again, people fascinated, seeing things that they can't really understand. And it's believable. You're watching movies and they're able to make things that are entirely fictional look real. And that led us into World War II. New media being exploited by Hitler to propagandize people and convince them to hate, to draw out deep-seated biases that people don't really spend much time within themselves focusing on. This is the stuff I'm an expert on. It's why I'm a good writer, a great photographer. I can transition into music production and even learning music. Media is my expertise. How it affects people and why, how to utilize it, how to use it, how to market with it, how to trick the mind into thinking the ugliest thing is a surrealist heaven. I've done that countless times at weddings, at photo shoots, bring people to a place and they're like, why are we here? I'm like, just wait. So what does this mean for our era? Well, I think we're seeing the results. But you can almost guarantee the ones telling you to distrust everything you knew based on new media and utilizing new media to harp on the same message over and 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 over again. If you don't think Donald Trump and their group of people haven't been doing that, that's exactly what they've been doing. Stop watching the news. Stop reading the newspaper. Those are corrupt. Come into our world. But you don't realize their world and what they've created is 5 people. You know, I probably get 2 interactions on anything I post. And it's because I know enough to know I don't want to exploit anything. But the times come where I feel like I can't be silent anymore. I can't hide behind my knowledge and use it for just self. We have to do something. Otherwise, people are going to die. People are already dying. And if you don't think that the smartphone revolution of 2011 and the AI revolution of the 2020s isn't going to lead to extreme darkness in this world, you're fooling yourself, because it's happened every time. And they're working really hard on it now. So I hope, rather than leaning into common sense, you lean into you're probably being lied to.